Close your eyes for a second and picture a Friday night in the 1970s. The smell of the radio on, the crackle of a needle dropping on a record, the feeling that the whole world was in that song. There was something in the air back then that music captured like nothing else could. So today, we're going back, because you grew up in the 70s, and these 10 songs will bring back the best memories. Number 10, American Pie by Don McLean. If there is one song that belongs entirely to the 1970s, not just as a hit, but as a moment of shared cultural experience, it's this one. Don McLean released American Pie in November 1971 on the album of the same name, and within weeks, it had taken on a life of its own. By January 15, 1972, it had reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, where it stayed for 4 weeks. The album itself hit the top of the Billboard 200 shortly after. At 8 minutes and 36 seconds, it was, at the time of release, the longest song ever to reach number 1. McLean was a 26-year-old folk singer from New Rochelle, New York, who had grown up delivering newspapers. When he was 13, he opened his paper bundle one morning and read about a plane crash in Iowa that had killed Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper on February 3, 1959. Years later, while working out what had happened to the innocence of that era, the rock and roll generation, the optimism, and then the slow unraveling of the 1960s, he wrote American Pie. The phrase, "the day the music died," was his, and it stuck to that crash forever. McLean dedicated the album to Buddy Holly and deliberately refused to explain the song's symbolism. Radio stations printed their own interpretations. Talk shows debated it. The mystery became part of the appeal. He eventually released his handwritten manuscript notes in 2015, when the documents sold at Christie's auction house for $1.2 million. The Recording Industry Association of America later ranked it the 5th greatest song of the 20th century. It was selected for preservation in the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress in 2017 as culturally, historically, and artistically significant. For anyone who was a teenager or young adult in the early 1970s, this was not just a song on the radio, it was a conversation starter, a riddle, a nostalgic wave before nostalgia even had a name. People gathered around it the way they gathered around a fire, trying to work it out, comparing interpretations, arguing about what the jester and the king and the girl who sang the blues really represented. 8.5 minutes felt short. That almost never happened. Number 9, Imagine by John Lennon. Imagine all the people. John Lennon released Imagine in October 1971, just 2 years after the Beatles had played their final public performance. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States and number 1 in the United Kingdom. It became, over the decades that followed, one of the most recognized songs ever recorded. Lennon wrote and recorded it at his home, Tittenhurst Park, in Ascot, England. The piano on the recording is a Steinway Grand that Lennon owned. Yoko Ono has been credited as a co-inspiration, and the song shares thematic similarities with her 1964 book of instructional poems, Grapefruit. Lennon later acknowledged her contribution more publicly than he did at the time of release. The song arrived in a world still deeply unsettled. The Vietnam War was ongoing, social divisions were running high, and public trust in institutions was fraying. Into that atmosphere, Lennon placed something calm, almost quietly radical, an invitation to picture a world without the structures that divide people. It was not combative, it was patient. The production, handled by Lennon alongside Phil Spector and Yoko Ono, was deliberately simple. Piano, strings, Lennon's voice, nothing competed with the words. In 1999, the song was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Rolling Stone ranked it 3rd on its list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. It became a permanent fixture at peace rallies, memorials, and moments of collective mourning around the world. when Lennon was killed in New York City on December 8, 1980. Imagine was one of the first songs people reached for in grief. For those who heard it for the first time during the decade it was written, it holds a particular weight, the sound of a man asking the world to try harder, wrapped in the simplest melody imaginable. It didn't feel like a political statement. It felt like a quiet plea from someone who genuinely believed things could be different, and that belief, however complicated Lennon himself was, came through in every note.
Imagine all the people.
Number 8. Superstition by Stevie Wonder. 1972, Stevie Wonder was already a decade into his career at Motown Records, having signed with the label as an 11-year-old in 1961. But it was in the early 1970s that he entered what many have called his classic period, a stretch of albums that redefined what was possible in contemporary music. Superstition was released in October 1972 and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1973, spending 1 week at the top. It also hit number 1 on the R&B chart. The song was originally written for Jeff Beck, who had worked with Wonder in the studio, but Wonder kept the final version for himself after sensing it had something special. He wrote, produced, and played almost every instrument on the recording, including the clavinet, drums, bass, and piano. The clavinet riff that drives the song became one of the most recognizable hooks in popular music, immediately identifiable and endlessly imitated since. Superstition was part of the album Talking Book, which also contained You Are the Sunshine of My Life. Together, the two singles established Wonder as one of the defining voices of 1970s music. The Grammy Awards agreed. Superstition won him the Grammy for Best Rhythm and Blues Song in 1974. The song had an energy that translated across every format: AM radio, basement parties, roller skating rinks, school dances. It carried people with it, whether they were paying attention or not. That kind of magnetism is rare, and it hasn't faded. 50-plus years later, it still arrives like a physical force when it comes through a speaker. Wonder was 22 years old when he wrote it. He had already been famous for half his life. Number 7. Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. When Queen's record label first heard Bohemian Rhapsody, they refused to release it as a single. It was nearly 6 minutes long, it had no refraining chorus, and it moved through completely different musical sections: a piano ballad, an operatic sequence with overdubbed vocals, a hard rock passage, and a quiet, reflective ending. It broke every convention of what a hit single was supposed to be. Freddie Mercury had been developing the song since the late 1960s, working from fragments he'd written while studying at Ealing Art College. By 1975, he had brought it together fully and recorded it at Rockfield Studios in Wales. In August of that year, using 5 studios in total to complete the overdubs, the number of vocal tracks stacked on top of each other during the operatic section approached 180. The tape itself began to wear thin from repeated recording passes. The song was released on October 31st, 1975, and the path to the public came through a friendship. DJ Kenny Everett at Capitol Radio received a promotional copy on the condition that he not play it on air. He played it 14 times in 2 days. The phone lines at the station were overwhelmed. EMI had no choice but to release it. By November 22nd, Bohemian Rhapsody was number 1 on the UK singles chart, where it remained for 9 weeks, including the 1975 Christmas number 1 slot. In the United States, it reached number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was later inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2004, and in 2017, it was selected for preservation in the Library of Congress National Recording Registry. For those who heard it on the radio in late 1975 and into 1976, the memory is specific. You heard a song that sounded like nothing else, and you couldn't quite explain what it was. Queen had also released a promotional video, one of the earliest and most influential music videos ever made, that helped define a format long before MTV existed.
Nothing really matters.
Number 6. Dancing Queen by ABBA. By the summer of 1976, ABBA were already well known in Europe and Australia, but Dancing Queen was the song that cemented their international status in a way nothing previous had quite managed. The Swedish group, Agnetha Fältskog, Björn Ulvaeus, Benny Andersson, and Annie Frid Lyngstad, recorded Dancing Queen in August 1975 at Metronome Studios in Stockholm. It was released in August 1976 and hit number 1 in 15 countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and across most of Western Europe. In the US, it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on April 9, 1977, and remained there for 1 week. It was ABBA's only number 1 single in the United States. Andersson and Ulvaeus wrote the music, and the production drew on the influence of the Philadelphia soul sound that was prominent in American music at the time. The track was built around a piano figure, layered strings, and the 2-voice harmonies of Agnetha and Annie Frid that had become the group's signature. The song was performed by ABBA on the eve of the wedding of King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden in June 1976. Disco was at its peak, and Dancing Queen arrived at exactly the right moment, polished enough for radio, energetic enough for the floor. For those who heard it coming out of a car radio on a summer evening in 1976, or through the speakers at a school gymnasium, it carries the specific weight of that moment in time. There was a lightness to it that felt almost effortless, as if ABBA had simply reached into the air and pulled it out fully formed. ABBA were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010. Dancing Queen remains the song most associated with the group, and most associated with the feeling the entire decade had at its brightest. Number 5. Hotel California by Eagles. Don Felder was sitting on the beach in Malibu in the mid-1970s, working on a guitar idea that felt different from what the Eagles had been doing. He laid down a demo, instrumental, atmospheric, built on an unusual chord sequence that created a sense of both arrival and unease at the same time. He played it for Don Henley and Glenn Frey. The song that emerged from those initial chords became Hotel California. The album Hotel California was released on December 8, 1976. The title track was released as a single on February 22, 1977, and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on May 7, 1977, spending 1 week at the top. The album itself spent 8 non-consecutive weeks at number 1 on the Billboard 200. No studio album by an American band has sold more copies in the United States. It was certified 26 times platinum by the RIAA, representing over 26 million copies sold domestically alone. Henley and Frey wrote the lyrics, and Henley has described the song in various interviews as being about the dark underbelly of the American dream and the excess that defined Southern California life at the time. It was also, he said in a 2013 documentary, a song about a journey from innocence to experience. The guitar solo at the end of the song, a 2-minute 12-second exchange between Felder and Joe Walsh, was voted the best guitar solo of all time by readers of Guitarist magazine in 1998. At the 20th Grammy Awards in 1978, Hotel California won Record of the Year. The Eagles were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998. Hotel California was named one of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. It remains one of the most played songs in American radio history. Number 4. Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac. By early 1976, Fleetwood Mac was in a state of personal upheaval that almost nobody outside the band fully understood. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, who had joined the group in 1974, were breaking up. John and Christine McVie, who were married, were divorcing. And yet the band kept showing up to the studio at Sausalito's record plant and laying down tracks that would become one of the best-selling albums of the decade. Go Your Own Way was written by Lindsey Buckingham and was the lead single from Rumors, released on February 4, 1977. It reached number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States. The song was written by Buckingham as a direct response to the end of his relationship with Nix. Nix has said in interviews over the years that she felt stung by some of the lyrics, and that she made her feelings known to Buckingham at the time, but she sang her harmonies on it anyway. Rumors went on to become one of the best-selling albums of all time, certified 20 times platinum in the United States. It spent 31 consecutive weeks at number 1 on the Billboard 200, displacing the Eagles Hotel California at the top. Don't Stop, The Chain, Dreams, and You Make Loving Fun all followed as singles. The album won Grammy Album of the Year in 1978, but Go Your Own Way was the opening statement, the one that arrived first, carried the most tension, and set the tone for everything that followed. For those who heard it on the radio in early 1977, it had an emotional directness that was hard to look away from, and knowing even a little of the backstory made it hit harder, because everyone in that studio was living through something, and the music made no attempt to pretend otherwise. Number 3. Stayin' Alive by Bee Gees. Few songs are more completely fused to a single cultural image than Stayin' Alive is to the opening sequence of Saturday Night Fever. But the song existed first, and it captured something real before the film turned it into an icon. Barry, Robin, and Maurice Gibb recorded Stayin' Alive in 1977 as part of the soundtrack for the film that would star John Travolta. The song was released as a single in December 1977 and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on February 4th, 1978, where it stayed for 4 weeks. It also topped charts in the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and numerous European countries. The Bee Gees wrote, produced, and recorded much of the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack under the supervision of producer Carl Richardson and engineer Albie Galutin, working alongside producer Barry Gibb. The falsetto harmonies that had become their trademark were fully deployed here. The tempo, approximately 103 beats per minute, later became significant in a different context entirely. Medical researchers found it closely matched the recommended rate for CPR chest compressions, and the song has since been used in medical training programs for that reason. Saturday Night Fever became one of the best-selling soundtracks in history, certified 15 times platinum in the United States. The Bee Gees were already established long before disco. They had been recording since the early 1960s and had major hits throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s. But this was the moment that sealed their place as one of the defining acts of the decade. Stayin' Alive was not just a song about dancing. It was about surviving in a city, holding your head up, pushing through. And those 3 words in the title said everything the decade sometimes needed to hear. Number 2. I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. I Will Survive was not supposed to be the main attraction. When the single was released in the fall of 1978, it was the B-side. The intended hit was Substitute on the A-side. Radio DJs had other ideas. They flipped the record and started playing I Will Survive instead, and the response from listeners made it clear which song had actually arrived. Gloria Gaynor recorded the track in 1978, written by Freddie Perrin and Dino Fakaris. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 on March 10, 1979, where it stayed for 3 weeks. It also reached number 1 in the United Kingdom and multiple other countries. At the Grammy Awards in 1980, it won Best Disco Recording, the first and only time that category was awarded, as the Grammy organization retired it after that year. Gaynor had been performing since the late 1960s, and by 1978 had already recorded several albums. She has spoken publicly about the fact that she recorded I Will Survive while wearing a back brace, recovering from spinal surgery. That physical difficulty gave the recording session an extra dimension that nobody in the studio could have predicted would show up in the final product. The song became one of the defining anthems of its era, embraced by people going through endings, people starting over, people who needed to hear that they were still standing. It took on new audiences with each passing decade. The Library of Congress added it to the National Recording Registry in 2016 as a work of cultural and historical significance. Disco has often been dismissed in retrospect, but I Will Survive was never just disco. It was the real thing, and it has outlasted almost everything around it. Number 1. Dream On by Aerosmith. Aerosmith released Dream On in 1973, and almost nobody noticed. The song appeared on their debut album, reached a modest number 59 on the Billboard Hot 100, and quietly moved on. The band continued to tour, record, and build a following, but the song sat dormant. Then, in 1976, Columbia Records re-released Dream On as a single. This time, it reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. The rock audience had caught up to it, or the moment had finally arrived that the song deserved. Either way, it had its second life, and it has never stopped since. Steven Tyler wrote Dream On as a teenager, drawing on piano chords he had learned from his father, a classically trained musician. The song's structure, starting quietly, building through a slow and deliberate climb, was unlike most rock of its era. It asked for patience. It rewarded it. Tyler's vocal range on the recording is remarkable even by the standards of a genre full of technical singers. The final moments of the song, where the melody rises and Tyler pushes into the upper reaches of his range, became one of the most replayed moments in classic rock radio history. Aerosmith went on to become one of the best-selling rock acts in American history. But Dream On, written before any of that success, before they were famous, before anyone was paying much attention, captures something that the later, more polished recordings do not always match. It is the sound of a young man reaching for something he hasn't named yet. For those who first heard it in 1973 and didn't think much of it, and then heard it again in 1976 and finally understood what they'd missed, that double recognition is its own kind of memory. Some songs arrive before their audience is ready. Dream On was one of those. And then the audience caught up, and neither the song nor the band ever looked back. Those were 10 songs that defined an era, and if even one of them sent you somewhere else for a moment, then this video did exactly what it was supposed to do. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. And drop a comment below. Tell us which of these songs takes you back the furthest. We read everyone.